It says, and he entered Capernaum, and a centurion came forward to him. It's the same language. If you were to look in the Greek text, you can do this. I'm happy to show you. It's the same language that we have with the leper. Remember, the leper comes? This is the same language. So the centurion comes forward to him, beseeching him and saying, Lord, my servant is lying paralyzed at home in terrible distress. And he said to him, I will come and heal him. But the centurion answered, Lord, I'm not worthy to have you come under my roof, but only say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I'm a man under authority, with soldiers under me, and I say to one, go, and he goes, and to another, come, and he comes, and to my slave, do this, and he does it. When Jesus heard him, he marveled. He was amazed. Friends, there's only a couple accounts in the New Testament where Jesus is amazed. Over and over we find the crowds are amazed, or the disciples are amazed at something Jesus has done, right? But here is one of the only passages in the New Testament where we find that Jesus himself is amazed, or that he marvels at someone's faith. When is the last time your faith and my faith marveled God? Let's think about that for a minute. We find it's possible to do because Jesus marvels at this man's faith. It's not expected here, is it? This guy's a centurion. He's a Gentile. He's not even a Jew. What does he know about faith? He hadn't gone to Bible school. He hadn't sat in synagogue. He hadn't gone to Sunday school. You know the story. You don't expect a great faith lesson here, do you? But this man's faith causes Jesus to marvel. The only other case where Jesus marvels is at lack of faith. When he shows up in the Nazareth synagogue there in Luke, and he doesn't do many miracles there because he marvels at the lack of faith among certain people. So I don't know about you. I'd rather have Jesus marvel at my faith. Wouldn't you? So again, it's a great, great text here. So verse 10, when Jesus heard him, he marveled and said to those who were following him, truly, I say to you, not even in Israel or among Israel have I found such faith. I tell you, many will come from east and west and sit at table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven, while the sons of the kingdom will be thrown into the outer darkness, and men will weep and gnash their teeth. And to the centurion he said, go, be it done for you as you believed. And the servant was healed, what? At that moment. Just like it was in the case with the leper. So look at this. This is our second lesson for the harvest field. God honors all who have faith. God honors all who have faith. Doesn't matter what people say. It doesn't matter what someone's background is. God will move upon the individual that has faith. Look what Jesus says. He declares that he hasn't found such faith even in Israel. Wow. So you can imagine what his Jewish disciples were. They're probably not feeling too good about themselves right now. Yeah. Who's getting the faith lesson here? So we find Jesus responds to the plea of another outcast here, right? Again, this guy's a Gentile. Taboo, right? Because again, Gentiles, if you weren't a Jew in antiquity, that likely meant that you were an idol worshiper. Okay? How do you know that's not a good thing? So again, Jewish people had to distance themselves and abandon all forms of idolatry and worship only the true God of Israel. But this guy had another strike against him, we would say. He was a Roman centurion. See, since 63 BC, remember the Romans were ruling over the land of Israel, and the Jewish people didn't like that. Most of them didn't like it. And so this guy would have been hated by many. So for Jesus to respond in such a way, to even take the time and acknowledge a man such as this, again, there were probably some gasps there in the crowd. Now, it's interesting, though, if you read Luke's account, if you'll read this parallel account that's there in your text for you in Luke, we find that this man doesn't even come to Jesus. A delegation comes on his behalf of Jewish elders, and they come and they say, this guy is worthy to have you do this. He loves our nation. And you know what? He's even built the synagogue here. You can still see the foundations of it there in Jesus' own hometown of Capharnaum, or Capernaum, we say in English. You still see it today. But it's interesting. Look at what happens here. What does this man have to say about himself? I am not worthy. And I believe that gets the attention of God. Let us never think that we are worthy to have the Lord do anything for us. Really, if you want to just be honest, based on the biblical text, we're only really worthy of the wrath of God, aren't we? But God in His gracious mercy, right, has poured out forgiveness for all humanity. We can never lose sight of that. Whenever we come before the Lord, hey, maybe we're not getting it from a centurion or a Pharisee here or some great Bible prophet or whatever. It comes from a centurion. But what a great lesson. Let's always remember as we come before the Lord our unworthiness. Not putting ourselves down, not negating the great grace and mercy and love that God has for us. But in our own eyes, we can never presume to be worthy to have God do anything on our behalf. And again, I believe this really does cause Jesus to stop and marvel. And notice what happens. This guy's, where he's reasoning from, it's not based on any scripture. He doesn't come before Jesus and say, Jesus, in John chapter whatever, it says that this, that, and the other. So I'm asking you to heal. Or he doesn't say, in Isaiah, this, that, and the other. What does he do? He uses his own life situation, doesn't he? He says, you know what? I don't know. I believe God led him in this thought process. How do you know God can do that? Yeah, here's a guy that probably doesn't have very, very much background or much good Bible teaching. He's a God-fearer, and so obviously he has a little bit of understanding, but not like one of Jesus' disciples probably. But this guy just scratches his head as God's moving on his heart and says, hey, wait a minute, I'm a pretty powerful guy. I've got upwards of maybe 100 men under my command, and if I say jump, they say, how high? So it only stands to reason if Jesus is the Messiah, God's representative, God's source of salvation and healing, that if he simply says the word, guess what? That sickness will have to go. You got to love that theology, don't you? So he comes and just right where he's at has that great faith, and Jesus is amazed at this great faith, and he says, you know what? It's going to be just like you believe. And at that very hour, again, look what happens. He was healed. Now, again, there's a great verse, and here's what we want to close with. Musicians, you're welcome to go ahead and come forward if you like. But we want to close with what Jesus goes on to say here in this great passage. He not only heals this man's servant, but do you see what he declares? He says in verse number 10, truly I tell you, in no one in Israel have I found such faith. Verse 11, I tell you, many will come from east and west. Talking about the Gentiles, the non-Jews, and will eat with, guess who? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Ever heard of those guys before? Yeah, sure. And look what it says. In where? In the kingdom of heaven. While the heirs of the kingdom will be thrown into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now, Jesus is referring to that great end-time banquet that Jews looked forward to in eternity, when the redeemed of all Israel, they thought just Israel, would sit down at that banqueting table. Now, there were probably some exceptions, but most, it appears, believed that this would be a strictly Jewish affair. But look what Jesus does here. He says, you better set another table. You better set a few more chairs out,